Learning objectives. After completing this digital module, learners will be able to understand at a particular price level the aggregate demand for final goods equals aggregate supply of the final goods. Learn that the instance of an investment company valuing a stock and then comparing the predicted results to the actual movement of the stock's price is called ex ante analysis. Understand that the marginal propensity to consume is the fraction of total additional income which people use for consumption. Understand that in theory of determination of output or income, all variables are planned ex ante variables. Learn that a shift in the demand curve displays changes in demand at each possible price, owing to change in one or more non-price determinants. Learn that the movement in demand curve occurs along the curve, whereas the shift in demand curve changes its position due to the change in the original demand relationship. Understand that a shift in demand curve occurs due to the changes in the determinants other than price, for example, the things that determine buyers' demand for a good rather than goods price. Understand that if there is change in values of autonomous consumption or in autonomous investment, it will cause change in equilibrium, output, and aggregate demand. Learn that many governments in developed nations have been introducing fiscal austerity programs, cutting spending and lifting taxes in a bid to lower their budget deficits. Ex ante and ex post. The ex ante and ex post measures. The ex ante is a Latin word which means that one needs to look at future events based on possible predictions. An example of ex ante analysis is when an investment company values a stock ex ante and then compares the predicted results to the actual movement of the stock's price. The ex post is another Latin word which means that one needs to look at results and events after they have occurred. Companies attain ex post data to forecast future earnings. The ex ante consumption and investment. The ex ante consumption expenditure refers to planned or desired consumption expenditure of households. The consumption function is represented by C is equal to C bar plus BY, where C bar indicates autonomous consumption, that is consumption expenditure when income is zero. B shows marginal propensity to consume, or MPC, and Y stands for level of income. The marginal propensity to consume, or MPC, is the fraction of total additional income which people use for consumption. We can get it by subtracting the marginal propensity to save MPS fraction from 1. Ex ante investment expenditure refers to planned investment expenditure of private firms. The investment demand refers to private planned or ex ante investment expenditure by the firms. Again, it should be kept in mind that in theory of determination of output or income, all variables are planned ex ante variables. The ex ante aggregate demand for final goods. In a two-sector economy of the household and firm, the ex ante aggregate demand, or AD, for final goods is the sum total of ex ante consumption expenditure, or C, and ex ante investment expenditure, I, on the final goods. That is, an economy gets in equilibrium phase when the aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply, that is AD is equal to AS. Classification of receipts and expenditure. Revenue receipts and capital receipts of the government budget. For the revenue receipts, the liabilities or assets have not been created. These types of proceedings of taxes, rate of interest or dividend on any government bond or securities, cess or any other receipts for the services as provided by the government. They are the current income receipts from various sources and shown as the means of government expenditure. The capital receipts are the outcomes of creating liabilities or borrowing and reducing assets or disinvestment. That is why the raising of funds by the government by incurring a liability or by disposing of some assets are entitled as capital assets. In the case of revenue receipts, government is not bound to return the amount in future, that is, they are non-redeemable. But the capital receipts are intrinsically borrowing, so they must be paid along with interest. Revenue expenditure of the government budget. Similarly, the revenue expenditure neither creates assets nor reduces liability like the salaries of the employees, interest payment of past debt, etc. They are paid out by the revenue receipts. In order to maintain the government machinery, these expenditures are incurred. In general, all of such grants provided to state governments by the centre are thus treated as revenue expenditures. However, some of those would create assets in cases going forward. Capital expenditure of the government budget. The expenditure for purchasing the land, investing in the shares, and the repayment of the loans to state government, other foreign governments, and other companies, other cash payments, and acquisition of valuables are the capital expenditure. They are usually for longer periods, mainly associated with real capital or financial assets. The capital stocks are added through these types of expenditure and increase its future productivity as well. Capital expenditures are incurred from the capital receipts of government, including capital transfers from outside of the country too. The short-run fixed price analysis of the product market. Aggregate demand curve. At a fixed price, the value of ex-ante aggregate demand for final goods, that is AD, has been equal to the sum of total ex-ante consumption expenditure and the investment expenditure. Under the effective demand principle, the equilibrium output of the final goods is equal to ex-ante aggregate demand. The vertical axis represents the price level of all final goods and service. The aggregate price level is measured by either the GDP deflator or the CPI. The horizontal axis represents the real quantity of all goods and services purchased as measured by the level of real GDP. Autonomous change on equilibrium demand in the product market. The equilibrium output and aggregate demand at fixed price and constant interest rate is derived by solving the equation y is equal to a oblique L minus b. Clearly, value of y will depend on values of a, that is C and L, and b, that is MPC. Thus, if there is change in values of C, that is autonomous consumption, or I, autonomous investment, it will cause change in equilibrium output and aggregate demand. When autonomous investment increases, AD1 line shifts upward and assumes the position of A2 line, which intersects 45-degree line at E2, making it a new equilibrium point. Thus, E1F measures the amount of excess demand. The new equilibrium values of output and aggregate demand are OM2 and M2E2 respectively. They are greater than their initial values because of investment multiplier effect. Multiplier mechanism. Many governments in developed nations have been introducing fiscal austerity programs, cutting spending and lifting taxes in a bid to lower their budget deficits. If the multiplier is 0.5, then an initial government expenditure reduction of 1% of GDP reduces real output by 0.5%. Summary. Let us summarize what we have learned. Consumption usually denotes what people had planned to consume during the same period. Similarly, investment means the amount a producer plans to add to their inventory. Since consumption is the complement of savings, as the additional income of the economy is either put into additional savings or used for extra consumption by the people. If we subtract the marginal propensity to save from 1, we get the marginal propensity to consume. Aggregate demand for final goods consists of ex ante consumption, ex ante investment, government spending, etc. The rate of increase in ex ante consumption due to a unit increment in income is called marginal propensity to consume. Investment is defined as addition to the stock of physical capital, such as machines, buildings, roads, etc. That is, anything that adds to the future productive capacity of the economy and changes in the inventory or the stock of finished goods of a producer. If quantity supplied is either in excess of or falls short of quantity demanded at this price will change because of excess supply or demand. The rate of increase in ex ante consumption due to a unit increment in income is called marginal propensity to consume. For simplicity, we assume a constant final goods price and constant rate of interest over short run to determine the level of aggregate demand for final goods in the economy. An increase or decrease in autonomous spending causes aggregate output of final goods to increase or decrease by a larger amount through the multiplier process.